Are you a racist?
We have to do more than just pretend.
If these people win, we are going to lose our country.
If enough Americans did this, it would be a massive step forward.
Ask God to show me what it is I can do.
But I'm now a red hat wearer, and I'm proud to be.
Why won't you just criticize Donald Trump?
Everyone, I am very excited for the conversation we have today because, frankly, I think if today's guest had been the Republican nominee in the state of Pennsylvania, she would be the senator from Pennsylvania right now. So welcome to the show, Kathy Barnette.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited.
So, Kathy, for people that may not be familiar with you and what you do, tell us a little about who you are and what you do.
Oh, my goodness. When people ask me that question, it's like, okay, what version do I give? Just a really short version is that I love our country. And I am so disturbed. I've had many different lives that I've lived. But one of the latest is that I was a homeschooling mama bear. My husband and I saw 10 years ago what most people are just now waking up to. And it was very specific. It's exactly what we're dealing with today. And my husband and I both said, no, that would not be happening to our children. So we started about 10 years ago of homeschooling our babies when they were very little, kindergarten and second grade. And as they were matriculating through school, I began to just really pay attention to the world that they were about to inherit. And that started me really looking intensely at what our legislators are doing. And so by 2019, I decided I had had enough. And that if better people did not start getting engaged, we were going to lose our country. And so in early 2020, I ran for the very first time in my congressional race, which then led to the 2022 senatorial race in Pennsylvania that we did very well on, and I believe would have won had Republicans not kneecapped my race. And I continue working with Vivek Ramaswamy as his national grassroots director. To today, hosting my own podcast, The Kathy Barnette Show, and just trying to speak truth.
I'm interested to hear, you had mentioned that about 10 years ago, you noticed a lot of what we are experiencing now. And I'm curious because I think for a lot of people, the last couple of years hit them by a tidal wave. You know, like, I didn't see this coming. I didn't see what was happening. I guess, what were you observing and what things are you like, well, that's not right to me. That doesn't make sense to me. And I guess what things caught you onto the game early?
Yeah. I was a political activist even before I knew I was a political activist. I was just looking around and saying, this doesn't seem really good. I mean, I've always been, although I had never attended a Republican anything, any kind of rally that I was aware of or meeting until 2020. Even before then, I was always focused on the issues, understanding the issues. So whether, I held my very first, this is probably 15 years ago, I held my very first conference, Understanding Islam of the Quran versus Islam of my opinion. We have a lot of people who, pontificate about what Islam is and is not based on their opinions or based on the latest opinions of talking heads. But I had read the Quran and several of their Hadith literature when I was in college. And I was like, what I'm hearing, how people are describing Islam is not really Islam of the Quran. So I was always just kind of aware of this, right? So then when you had Obama trying to bring in all of these Syrian refugees and say, oh, don't worry about it. They're going to assimilate right into the culture. You won't even know these people are here, right? I knew enough to know that's not true. So maybe we need to actually understand the lens through which these particular people are looking at the world around them. And does that lens line up with the lens that most Americans look through to view the world and to come up with our value system? So I was doing things like that, already paying attention. I read prolifically and I'm smart. I'm just observant. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You just have to be willing to observe.
I think that's a remarkably good point, though, because I think one of the number one failings of people now, like number one, like they're not observing, like you said, but I think number two, they're looking at other people's opinions. They're not consuming primary sources. And I think that's one of the number one failings when we're trying to decide on something.
You know, and I think it's almost human nature, right? Is that I want someone to just tell me what to do. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to, spend a lot of time, because that's a lot of work, reading and studying and disciplining yourself. So that you can be informed and you can inform others. That takes a lot of work. And I think especially in the American culture, but I think it's just a part of human nature, is that we tend to want to be led. Hence the reason why you always have these dictators that pop up every now and again throughout history who recognize people want to be told what to do, and they will bend the knee and follow if it makes their lives a little bit easier. And I think that's what we're, contending with today. Specifically, what caused my husband and I to take our kids out of school was my daughter had just started kindergarten. And I'm one of those moms who was looking forward to my children getting on that little yellow bus and going away for 8 hours out of the day. I had my own life. I had my own dreams, the things that I wanted to do. And I was looking forward to the kids being out of the house for 8 hours so I can go back to, go take college classes. I was an adjunct professor of corporate finance. So now maybe I can take on more full-time employment in that arena. But my daughter had just started kindergarten, and she came home with a big stack of paperwork, as they typically do. And I was thumbing through it, and I saw that my 5-year-old had a guidance counselor. And I started thinking, like, I had a guidance counselor when I was in high school who asked me if I wanted to take the ACT, the SAT, which college I wanted to go to. So I was curious on what a guidance counselor is guiding my 5-year-old on. So I emailed the guidance counselor, asked for her teaching objectives, and it was 35 of the most ridiculous things in essence, all throughout Pennsylvania. These guidance counselors serve as parents. They go into the classrooms twice a week. And I remember very distinctly, number 5 was to teach my daughter how to distinguish between the truth and a lie. And I'm thinking to myself, most adults I know can't distinguish between the truth and a lie. So what rubrics are you using?
I think there's about 81 million of them that are having a hard time turning.
I know, like most adults I know. So I'm asking her, what rubrics are you using to go into my 5-year-old classroom and teach her how to distinguish? But number 15 was the one that was like kind of the final nail on the coffin. It was to teach my daughter how to identify and respect different family configurations. Today, we know that as same-sex marriage, transgenderism, queer, LGBTQAI plus, and all of that kind of stuff. And I remember making an appointment, going in, asking her, show me what you're going to take into my 5-year-old classroom to teach her how to both identify and respect different family configurations. And she took out these beautifully illustrated books about Billy going to his father's home, and his father's boyfriend, Henry, was there. Things like that. And so, but it was because I was observant, and I was willing to do some work. I don't want to be lazy. And I was willing to, just stay alert of what's going on around us and not be afraid at finding out what's really happening.
I guess that's like one of the major problems that you look at is I think often we're trying to solve our problems politically. But, Andrew Breitbart was always fond of saying that politics is downstream from culture. And it feels like in a lot of ways, Kathy, we've lost the culture.
We have.
And I guess when you look at it, kind of where have we gone since then? And what things do we start to do to try to put this back together? Because I think there's a lot of work that has to happen.
I'm so glad you said that quote. You're right. And you hear a lot of conservatives say it, that politics runs downstream from culture, but entertainment runs downstream, culture runs downstream from entertainment, the things we read, the things we listen to. And so that's why the role of media and outlets like yours and mine, it's the reason why I started a podcast, is because if I want to affect culture, then I have to be willing to give people good content and not this bobblehead content that we generally see, or someone picks a narrative and then emails it out to everyone and everyone just parrot that same narrative. So if you want to affect politics, go upstream and affect culture. If you want to affect culture, go upstream and have the courage to speak truth and not allow that truth to be suppressed. And so, again, politics, culture, entertainment. But in order to speak the truth, you got to go upstream from truth. And that is having courage to speak that truth.
It does to me feel like, and I feel like that the pandemic was a big piece in this. I'm curious your opinion, that a lot more people have courage than they did, let's say, 3 years ago. But I guess looking at it, where do you see this taking us? Like, do you think we have more courage as a group, but do you think we're getting more courage as a group? I do agree with you. I think that is the number one thing that's stopping us.
It is, right? Like sometimes we're like, oh, we just need to give people more information. We just need to tell people, they just need to see it clearly. You guys can see my dog in the background right now, Harriet.
I hear mine running around on the floor above me, so don't worry about it.
It's too hot. I didn't want to put her outside or anything like that. But no, you don't need, but then, I spent a lot of time, many of your listeners may have heard of Chloe Cole. She's the little detransitioner, the little 15, she had her breasts removed when she was 15 years old. And now she has started detransitioning back to, well, she was always a girl, but she stopped pretending she was a boy. And so now she's trying to live once more as a girl, but she has a lot of uphill challenges in front of us. And cause I'm a person who wants to know the why, like the why. I'm literally taking a neuroscience class from Harvard because I want to know how the brain works and why we behave the way we behave. So I will do the legwork to actually understand the why. But then I realize people don't need another story on why mutilating little children's body is wrong. Why is why chemically castrating a little boy before he even knows anything about life, about himself, and about what kind of family he wants. Why chemically castrating that little boy by the age of 13 or 11 is evil. People don't need to know why. People know that's wrong, right? Even a dog knows to protect its young. So it's not why we should or should not allow little girls to have their ovaries removed by the age of 16. We don't need to have that conversation. We need to have the conversation. How did we become such a culture of weaklings, of cowards, of spineless people? That's the conversation we need to be having, and trying to encourage people to have courage, stand up. You're not going to save yourself or the country by sticking your head in the sand, because eventually these people are going to come knocking at your door. And so now is the time to find others who are standing up and having courage and get behind them. Don't just sit back, which is what most Republicans do, is that you see someone with courage standing up and speaking truth, and then all of hell begins to pounce on that person. And our side of the aisle, we just sit back and look and wait to see if they're going to be taken out or how they're going to be taken out, versus running alongside that person and shoring them up. And then we criticize why we don't have good people willing to put their neck on the line. Well, because many within the Republican Party, quite frankly, are a bunch of cowards, and we're looking for the easy way out. We're looking for someone else to do all the work so we can go on vacation, so we can go down to the shore.
That's one of the things I struggle with, Kathy, because I think often, do I find myself voting Republican most of the time? Yes, I've never voted for a Democrat in my life. But at the same time, I feel like the problem is we like a good press conference, or we like a strongly worded letter, or we're going to have a committee to talk about maybe forming a committee to maybe do something that could possibly happen. And I feel like we like to do a lot of these motions, but not actually solve anything. And
yes.
The left isn't doing that. And I guess when we look at how do we handle that? Because that is a huge problem. I think it's a show for people.
It is. It's a pacifier. It's not milk, it's not substance, but it calms us down, right? We just like to see people moving. We like to see activity, some dust being kicked up, right? Here's the reason why. I understand some people who are spending their energy on this particular strategy, which is registering people to vote during a general election. Where for the most part, you can now register on the day of the election itself. I understand why people are focused on, the strategy is registering people to vote or changing people's registration from Democrat to Republican in a general election where it doesn't matter, because the person's doing something, right? It's some activity, and it's not requiring me to do anything. I can just look at them and say, oh yeah, that person is doing something, right? And, and I don't want to knock, because I think some of these people are genuinely looking for a way to contribute. But this goes to the problem. There are many within the Republican Party who winning is not their number one goal. And so they put up barriers that make it very difficult for good people who want to be involved, who want to affect change, to actually be able to do anything. Sure. And so you see a number of, pretty decent people who are on the outside just kind of twiddling their thumbs, trying to find ways to do something, anything. I see the country is going to hell in a handbasket. I don't really know what to do. There's not really good leadership directing us on what to do. So let me run over here and, go to prisons and register 5 people, do a picture, put it on Twitter, and it looks like I'm doing something, right? And people on our side, it's like a pacifier. It's, it makes us feel good. Somebody's doing something. But is it really effective? Is it the most effective thing we can be doing? So when you ask me what are some of the problems, that's number one. I used to say, we in the Republican Party, we have some of the best ideas. They're not perfect, right? Because no one's perfect, but they're certainly better than what Democrats are offering. So I will often say we have the better ideas on our side of the aisle. We just keep picking people who suck at telling our story.
Well, I think you're hitting on exactly what I see the problem is, Kathy, because it's like, I don't think we have that much of a problem winning elections. I guess 2020 is another thing. We can talk about that some other time. But I guess one of the problems we have is once people get in and they get in those positions, trying to charge the attorney general, who's responsible for holding himself to charges, which he's not going to charge himself, with obstruction of Congress doesn't make any sense. Or trying to impeach the Homeland Security Secretary when you realize the Senate's not going to improve it too. It just feels like a lot of these things are for show and not for action.
Well, yeah, they are. But one, on the Republican side, right? Democrats suck. I can talk about them all day. Their laws are ridiculous. It's untenable. It's downright evil in many regards, right? So we know they suck, and there's not a whole lot we can do about them right now. So I'm going to put my gaze on the Republican Party for right now, because although I believe the Republican Party is probably just as bad as Democrat Party. Democrats are crazy. They have lost their mind. They're horrible, right? But Republicans, like I said, which is evil? Not knowing what to do and finding yourself in a ditch, or knowing there's a ditch and leading people towards that ditch. And so within the Republican Party, like I said, we have a stronger grasp of what's good, what's evil, what's a good policy, what's a bad policy. And yet you see, whether in the House or the Senate, we just run around and do absolutely nothing. We do not hold these people's feet to the fire. But I believe it's our job as Republicans in a two-party nation, right? I'm not going to be an independent because they never win. Not going to be libertarian because they don't win anything. So I'm stuck between Democrats and Republicans. So I'm in the Republican camp. And although there are a number of issues in the Republican Party, I'm still a registered Republican because I believe we should not abandon the Republican Party. We should do our part to perfect it. And so here's my attempt at perfecting. My long-winded way of saying what I'm about to go through, what I'm about to talk about is really not just to jump on the bandwagon and criticize the Republican Party, but for the sake of criticizing, but because it's our job within the party to perfect the party. So one, we have horrible candidates 9 out of 10 times because one, you have great candidates like, I don't know, me, who ran for U.S. Senate. And instead of the people getting behind me and staying behind me, they were gullible to believe Dr. Oz, who had never shown a conservative bone in his body, was now all of a sudden the symbol of America first, right? So one, you don't have good people because you as voters keep voting for horrible people and you vote for them because for the most part, you're gullible. And so when someone comes in and says, I endorse this person, instead of you thinking, you just follow. So do better, be better. That's the reason why I created my organization.
The question I would ask them, because voters watching are probably asking this, well, then I want to do a better job at that. How do I do a better job at that? Because I feel like you get people out there that, maybe they'll lie to you or they'll do whatever, or they'll play dirty politics. Like, how do you do a better job then? Because I think we all want to do that.
I think most people, like I said, we all have different instincts and desires. Some of them have a stronger impulse behind them than some others. And I think one of the strongest impulses within most human beings is they just want to follow. They just want to be told what to do. It's not that they don't want good. It's just that being told what to do has a stronger impulse behind it. And so you need to start challenging that within yourself. You have two options. One option is easier. Someone is telling you what to do. But then there's this other impulse within you that says, wait a minute, Dr. Oz, for example, just using him, he's Oprah's best friend. I've never heard him say a mumbling word about being a Republican, much less a conservative Republican. There's a lot of, because of who he is, there's a lot of his shows on YouTube and on it. So you can do a little work. You may have to do some work, but you can certainly do it. And so listen, I didn't sugarcoat it when I ran for office. I'm certainly not going to start sugarcoating it now that I'm not running for office. I owe no one anything. And in order for us to do better and to be better, as much as I would like to blame Sean Hannity and others who lied on me, it only worked because there was an audience that they knew were gullible enough to just follow what it is that they were saying. And so as much as I can blame Sean Hannity and many others, I won't name right now, I always have to go back to we as Americans, we have to be better. We have to do better. And you won't hear this kind of straight talk anywhere else because most people get into positions to build a platform so that they can just drive impressions and they will feed you whatever diet you're willing to, like a bird, like a baby bird and a mama bird, just stuffing food down your throat. If you're willing to keep your mouth open, they're going to shove it in there. And so to you, although this may be hard medicine and some people may find it a little prickly, It's like castor oil. Just take it. It's good for you, even if it doesn't taste good right now, is that we have to do better. That's lesson number one I learned. Number two, again, we have horrible candidates 9 out of 10 times because, and I thought it was just because we keep picking poor candidates. What I've learned being, working with the presidential campaign, having my own high profile campaign, is that the people who are really running these campaigns are not the candidates, but the consultants. When I was doing my dog and pony show in Washington, D.C., when I was running, and I would walk into a room, you would know all of these people if I mentioned their names. I'm a new person in the world of politics. The first 2 questions they asked me was, how much money have you raised? And how much more money can you raise? Those were the first, I tell you no lie. The guy walks into the room in DC. I'm sitting there. I don't know what these people are going to ask me. Before his bottom touched the seat, the first question that came out of his mouth was, how much money have you raised? Followed by the next question, how much more money do you think you're going to be able to raise between this date and that date? Those are the top 2 questions within the Republican Party. They look for, when they're trying to pick a candidate, what is your name ID? Because if you have a high name ID, they can fundraise that. Or how independently wealthy you are. Because if you're very wealthy, you can fund your own campaign. Those are the top 2 criteria when our people, our Republican consultants are scouring the nation to find candidates. Now, Democrats, they look for, we just need a body that fit the stereotype, right? We want a young, female, Hispanic. Oh, let's go get AOC, who's a bartender, and we will bring the money. We will do what we need to do to prop her up. But this is the image. These are the talking points we want. On our side, it is truly, how much money do you have, or how much money can we fundraise off of you? Which is a huge injustice to the people within the Republican Party, the grassroots people who are great people who deserve better.
You know what's interesting about that, Kathy, is I've heard Matt Gaetz talk about this before too. Like, even after someone gets elected, it's also just how much more money can you raise? And I guess when you look at it, like, how do we change that? Because to me, that's a huge problem. If somebody's campaigning to win, then once they win, they're still campaigning to raise. Nobody's actually concerned about legislating or actually solving a problem. So how do we change that in our political culture?
Well, those are the incentives, right? I mean, we're all creatures of responding to the greatest incentive, right? So the greatest incentive for a Republican politician is who's giving me the most money. And I am going to be at their beck and call. You and I, we're probably not going to be donating $1 million to any of these candidates. And so they don't really, when I ran for Senate, most of these high profile candidates didn't even go to events where the people were. They went to high ticketed events, but they wouldn't go to these grassroots events, and they would cancel them oftentimes, and they would not spend any time with the people because they are responding to their greatest incentive. So in the world of politics, we got to get rid of these super PACs. As an individual, as a candidate, I was only able to raise at max per person at that time, $11,000. That's as much as someone could give me. However, if that person was so inclined and I had a super PAC, they could write me $1 million check that will go to a super PAC, right? That is ran by someone I pick who understands me and what I want, who will run that particular super PAC. Well, for most grassroots candidates like myself, I didn't have a super PAC because I don't have any friends or family who's going to write me $1 million check. But what about those big corporate interest candidates who you giving them a $11,000 check really doesn't buy much of their attention, because they're incentivized to listen to the candidate who are the donors who can hold a $50 million fundraising for them, whereas you may raise 5,000 among you and your many friends, right? And so that's just how the game is incentivized. Vivek Ramaswamy talked a lot about this. He didn't have a lot of super PAC money. He was essentially self-funded his campaign, and you could see the difference between those particular candidates who were ingratiating themselves with corporate elites and doing what they wanted and pushing the policies that those corporate elites wanted, versus those candidates who spent all their time in front of the people.
So how do we get that out of politics then? Because to me, that would seem like we would have better candidates. We would have people that aren't making votes based on a budget. Because I think if we're going to solve things, yes, we have to solve the culture, but Kathy, we have to legislate a lot better. And I think right now we're not really worrying about legislating. Can we get super PACs out of politics? And if so, how do we do that?
Yeah. Well, it starts with getting candidates in who are not ran by super PACs. For example, again, my own candidacy, I spent $1.6 million in that entire race over 11 or 15 months. And the other two people I was in a statistical tie with, they spent $60 million, most of that given to them via a super PAC. I was about to win. The people, being gullible, many of them chose not to vote for me. Many of you did. And I'm so grateful to all those who did, because I still got almost 30% of the vote. Over 330,000 Pennsylvanians came out and voted for me. So that gives me some hope, right? We're not all gullible. There are a lot of us who have had it. We're done with it, right? We've seen some things and we want better. That gives me a lot of hope. However, it still wasn't quite enough. But that's one way of getting money out of politics, is that had the people knew what was in their own best interest and voted for it, you would have had a candidate that spent $1.6 million compared to those who spent $60 million. What I showed is that you don't need all of that big money if you're willing to do the hard work and get out here. We were spending 1,500 miles every single week in our car all across the state of Pennsylvania for 11 to 15 months. I can't remember which one any longer, but that's what I was able to do. And I did it with $1.6 million. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of sacrificing. That's a lot of missed events with my own family, doing my part to make sure we had better leadership in office who can be in a position when laws and bills come up, we can enforce those. Because that's the other thing. You're asking the Fox, which are our elected officials in DC, to regulate the hen house.
I saw a funny meme the other day. It was a fox doing a speech to a group of sheep, and it said, "I promise once elected, I will be a vegetarian."
Yes. and let me tell you, we have a number of sheep and among our voters on our side who are like, well, he did promise, right? I'm not willing to pay that price. And so that's the reason why. So if you want better, as I would say to the voters, you're going to have to do better. It's insanity. It's the literal definition of insanity to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result when better people present themselves to you, have the good sense to get around them and to build a wall around them and to protect them and to move them along the process. Don't just stand to the side and watch to see what happens, because ultimately you are going to be left with horrible leadership, which is what we have here in Pennsylvania. We have John Fetterman as a result of Republicans kneecapping my race.
I do feel like in some ways, and I think that's the hard part about it, is like I think living through the past few years have forced a lot of people to start doing better. I'm curious, like, do you feel that way as well? Do you feel like we're starting to lean in the right way, or how do you feel like we're doing in the last couple of years?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm gonna qualify my statement here, because among the grassroots are base voters. I have met some amazing people. I mean, you asked me, I mean, now I used to be just in Pennsylvania, but now traveling with Vivek, you mentioned a county in New Jersey or in New Hampshire or a county in Iowa. I see faces. I hear their stories. I'm sitting in their living room. I'm playing with their children. And we have some amazing people who want better, who deserve better. And so that's one aspect of it. But then we have the machine. We have the system, the political party, the GOP, right? It's a system. And in that system, we have gatekeepers. And these gatekeepers decide, as I said before, who the candidate will be. They decide who gets the money at the grassroots level to do any kind of work on the ground. They decide the messaging. And so when I look at that, and having walked behind the curtains with a very high profile presidential candidate running my own high profile senatorial race here in Pennsylvania, I am not speaking from mere opinions, but I am speaking as someone who has walked behind the curtains and who understand if we don't get better people with a spine to start standing up and speaking truth, all truly is lost. And it is, I guess, if I had to pick at this moment, the greatest Achilles heel to all of us within the Republican Party, it would be the Republican consultants. They are the Achilles heel, and they have learned nothing. We have lost every significant race that we should have won since 2017. Donald Trump won in 2016. From that point to now, we have become a party of losers. We lose everything. We have the better message. Democrats are literally mutilating little children's bodies. And we lost almost every single school board race all across the nation last year. I was there on the ground traveling the nation. We lost all across the nation, almost every single school board. How does that happen? Unless we become, I mean, it's not that they're so much smarter. They're literally mutilating children's bodies. And we within the Republican Party have still lost. We lost almost every single school board race. They're literally opening up our borders, flooding our nation with illegals, with criminals, with human trafficking, sex trafficking, with fentanyl, killing our children, destroying our countries and Social Security. And we're still losing. How does that happen? Exactly. And in large part, it is it's the GOP, the system. It is built to lose, and they have learned nothing. I am still talking to many of these people, and the reason why you wouldn't even, I'm driving through Pennsylvania, I wouldn't even know there's an election this November if I wasn't in the industry. It is like crickets out here. No one is really talking about it. The only ads I see on television are primarily Joe Biden's ads. Not a whole lot from a grassroots perspective or messaging. All we're doing is cutting memes and got you videos and driving up impressions so that people can get paid across social media platform. So the people, yes, they have learned a valuable lesson. I believe they want better. But we have a system in place that is not built to win. It is built to drive impressions and to fundraise.
So do we have to change the GOP or something like that too? Because I think as well, like I agree with you. Like you look at what Ronna McDaniel has done in her tenure as GOP chair, and it wasn't really helping anyone other than like, it sounded like she spent a lot of money on things she should have been spending them on. How do we handle that then? If the party's a problem, like what do we do with that? Because I think at the same time, like, it's the thing we have. Can we work with the thing we have? Do we rebuild it? What do we do?
We're going to have to perfect it. That's what I said. And we're going to have to, only Republicans have the stupid saying, you remember Ronald Reagan, 11th commandment, thou shalt not talk ugly about another Republican. That is ridiculous, people. Stop it. Stop it. I can't begin to tell you how many people said that to me as they were dragging me all across the nation. I never put out a derogatory an ad hominem video about anyone. I don't do that kind of stuff. It's not my character, and I refuse to become someone that I wasn't. And yet I would have Republicans saying, voters say, oh, remember Reagan's 11th commandment, say no evil about it. Stop it. We need to put a big spotlight on the Republican Party. We need to hold these people's feet to the fire. We need to exact extreme accountability on the Republican Party, starting with Donald Trump. For example, Jeremy, can you still see me?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. For example, when Donald Trump said on a podcast with a lot of very wealthy people that he is going to propose legislation that every foreigner who graduates from a 2-year or 4-year college get a green card. All of our collective voices should come down on him on that.
I don't like that idea at all.
No.
Yeah, I don't like that idea at all.
Yeah, but this is what I mean by we have to have extreme accountability on our side, and apparently it was effective. There were enough voices that said no to that Donald Trump's camp began to walk that back almost immediately, right? But that's the extreme accountability that we have to have, instead of saying, oh, Donald Trump must be doing some 30,000 foot chest, right? No. That's not the case. That's a dumb idea. And that should never be uttered from the mouth of a Republican candidate, especially someone, proclaiming to lead the conservative movement and the America First movement, right? So extreme accountability, but also it's going to require that we as conservatives start conserving again. Right now, we're conserving nothing. We've lost every single thing. Like, that's what conservatives do. That's the purpose of us being conservatives, is that we conserve. Conserve what? Conserve those 1776 values and policies that are the foundation upon which this nation rests and has made us the greatest country in the world, right? And when you began, I wrote an article kind of delineating all of the 1776 policies and on, we've conserved none of it. I probably list about 20, right? You can't list all of them because you're writing an article, but I list enough of very real things that we can say, oh my goodness, we have lost our effectiveness as a party, as a conservative movement. And so I would strongly encourage us to remember what it is that we're supposed to be conserving. Like, what are we supposed to be doing? What has happened to this movement? And begin to remember that.
Absolutely. Well, Kathy, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and you're one of my favorite follows on X. So for people watching, how can they connect with you? How can they support you?
Yes, you can go to kathybarnette.com. You can go to my podcast, wherever you stream your podcast, be it Apple, Spotify, Rumble, or YouTube, or anywhere in between. Please go subscribe, hit the notification button, like, share. It all helps. And of course, you can meet me over at Twitter at Kathy4Truth.
Very cool. Kathy Barnette, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Thank you.
And for those of you out there watching, don't forget to like this video, leave us a comment, and smash that subscribe button if you support liberty, freedom, and want to build a better future. We'll catch you guys next time.